welcome to the Township Historical Society. We have a very nice program tonight. As you know, we've sponsored a couple of historical related programs throughout the year. Back in January, we had John Emerson, who is a lifelong resident of Macomb County, currently lives in Mount Clemens. He's a former member of the Macomb County Historical Commission. John's program tonight will explain the de facto segregation that determined the pattern of settlement in Macomb County using research from his own family's history. So, I'd like to introduce John, and everyone give John a warm welcome.
Thank you. And I'm glad to be here. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And this is October 28th, 2013, and it's 7 o'clock. And this is the library we're in. That is Hart Plaza. And I started with this for one simple reason, to show the difficulty we've had in just living in Michigan. And Hart Plaza, and see those statues down there? I got a picture of that. That's slaves that's escaping the Amherst, Ontario. The Second Baptist Church in Detroit never lost one of us. Every one of us made it to Canada. This is the front of the Clinton Township City Hall. And I'm starting with Clinton Township and some of the things that Clinton Township's done. And I put both of these on one side. This is the PowerPoint presentation. Hello.
She just coughing. Just coughing. Sorry.
This is a picture of the library. I did the double again. The far off shot and up front on the front door. And this is the historical highlight. The Macomb County Union Choir is something that I belonged to when I was a kid. We couldn't go to regular churches in Macomb County, and if we could, we had to sit in the back or in the balcony. And this was formed in 1932, the Zion Missionary Baptist Church. It's no longer a Zion Missionary Baptist. Can everyone see that sign? Can everyone read that historical highlight? Okay. This union was, the purpose was to help churches through participating choirs. All money raised was left to host church each second Sunday. And the money was used first to buy pianos, then choir equipment. And the late Edward Logan Bell served as the second president for many years, and later Dorsey E. Williams. And this was basically Clinton Township, Quinn Earl. And at the end of this, which is defunct now, the last president was Reverend Paul Mile, and he's the last president. He died. The late George Emerson was a president at one time. Earl J. Howler, the late Deacon Prince Drury, served as vice president. And this is Macomb County Union Choir in front of the Attorney's Chapel Church. This is strictly the left side. I didn't have no way of getting that whole photo on one sheet. But this is the left side. Pardon?
I can't read it.
1940 what?
1942. We get the next slide, you'll be able to see it. That's slide number 2. This whole front row was ministered whether they had a church or not.
Is your relative in that, or are you in that picture?
If I am, I gotta be little, because I was born in 39, that's 42.
Yeah, you have to be little, yeah.
But our minister is in there, of the church I grew up in Roseville, First Baptist. And First Baptist is no longer in Roseville. They moved to Detroit. Now it's a Church of God in Christ in that same building in Roseville on Blair Street. At one time, African Americans couldn't build a church on a main street in Macomb County. It was always on side streets. But what happened, some of these side streets became main streets. And this is looking at the city of Mount Clemens, City Hall. What I like about this digital camera, the day I took it, the date's right on there. This is the Mount Clemens Public Library, and this is when they were doing the construction last year in 2012. And they helped me immensely in the Mount Clemens Public Library to put my history together. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
If you have any problem with that, let me know so I can do something. Okay, this is a census. Mount Clemens. Now, where black folks coming in, that's why I brought this. See that D? That's black. And there's a name. They're Wilson. It gives their age. But I thought there was no black in Mount Clemens until after World War I. That's not true. The census proves it.
What year is it?
Oh, we move that down so you can see it. The 19th census. So that'd be 1890. The first black church in Mount Clemens was the Second Baptist Church. Because they already had a First Baptist Church in Mount Clemens on North Avenue, 44,000 North Avenue. It's no longer First Baptist Church. And in the preceding years, they changed the name to Morning Star Baptist Church. That's my church. And then they went to the Greater Morning Star Missionary Baptist Church. See, in 1980 was a very difficult year for my church. The church split. We got a minister that wasn't really into what you should be into because you're a minister, and it split. And we hired a minister from Flint. He had a doctorate degree, J. Douglas Wiley. He left Morning Star and went to New Orleans, and they flooded his church while he's down there. Now, that's the only black funeral home I know of in Macomb County, United Memorial. It's on Michael Street, category across from the Mount Clemens Police, Mount Clemens Fire Department. And again, the thing I really like is that date. I took that picture that day. That's inside of it. Now, this is the Reverend John D. Rivers. He was one of the first black in New Haven. And he was a minister when he came, but he seen a need for a black church in New Haven. And he named it. And it's called the Greater New Hope.
What year is that?
1929. Does this help any when I do that?
Yeah.
He lived to be 100 years old. Now, it's still an active church in New Haven. It's due west of where the old New Haven Foundry was. You know, all that's blank now. It's all flat. It's gone. But he hasn't been in New Haven in a while. There is no New Haven Foundry. That's the City Hall complex in New Haven. Village Hall, I gotta correct that. That's the library in New Haven, but it's the Lennox Township Library, but it's on New Haven Road, right on the corner of New Haven Road. Anybody here familiar with Lennox Township? No, that surrounds New Haven. New Haven's built it. That's the New Haven Farmers grain elevator. Right next to it is where they used to store that. And that's where I buy my seeds for my little garden in the summer. You know, for 50 cents, you get more seeds than you can plant. And there's an old picture of the New Haven Foundry in 1926. And it was purchased by Sumner D. Lampkin. But he didn't have any workers. So Europeans were here, were working at the foundry. So he fixed them, he sent buses to North Carolina, South Carolina, and picked up workers. And that's how the black really got to New Haven. Anybody have any questions on it?
That was the largest employer there, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And that closed down recently, in the last 10 years, hasn't it?
Yeah, I would think so. I really don't have the answer to that one. But it's, the whole site's gone. It's been bulldozed down. Now, we got the city of Roseville. And that's looking at it from the side street, behind the police department. On the right is where the Roseville library is at. On the left is where Roseville municipal offices are. That's the main door on the side. And it's the city of Roseville. That's the place I grew up in. But we couldn't live anywhere we wanted in Roseville. We had to live in the Cone Garden. It's an 8-block area just north of 10 Mile. And I've got a picture of that. And that's, look at the public library, same building. Now, that's McCollum Garden. That's the county map of the place we could live. Kern Road at that time, in 1917, when they did this, was 10 Mile Road. Oakdale was the middle of it, and Church Street was the north boundary. Homer was on Macomb Street is now. Blair is still Blair. Lawn is still Lawn. Pearl is still Pearl. But Pinehurst is no longer Pinehurst. But that was the area I grew up in. And I lived on Lawn, probably that's 4th house now. But Lawn is right in the middle. And I had no idea how my dad ever found this place. None.
For some perspective, where's 10 Mile and Gratiot relative to that?
That's 10 Mile. Kern Road is 10 Mile.
10 Mile?
So it would be back to the west, to Gratiot. It would be to the east, to Kelly Road. Any of you old enough to remember when Al Mack used to have a riding stable there? Right on Kelly Road. Yeah. And Al Mack riding stable started right there. Well, that's gone now. Now, the church anniversary, the First Baptist Church of Roseville is there, and William Farrell was the first pastor there, and it lists the pastors they had. The Reverend W.D. Edding in 1920. 1926, Reverend J.C. Matthews, and on the first two, one came from Macedonia Baptist, Detroit, the second one came from Shiloh Baptist in Detroit. Then in 1928, we had Reverend A.J. Keys, Reverend Powell, Reverend Martin, Reverend Clark, Reverend R.B. Cohen, and back to Reverend A.J. Keys again. Now, I remember Reverend A.F. Thomas, he died at 43, 40, well, I was a little kid. Reverend Wallace, when I was a teenager, was a palace, was a pastor, and then Reverend Elijah Jr., he passed in 1967. Reverend C.L. Caldwell He pastored in 1968, Reverend David Rivers in 1971, and Reverend Oscar Dawson in 1978. Now, in 1993, the Reverend Linnell B. Caldwell came, and he moved the church from Roseville to Detroit. So that church is no longer at 397 Blair Street, Roseville. Also, every summer we have what they call Macomb Gardens Block Club. It's a Macomb Gardens celebration. This particular one is Saturday, August the 20th, 2011, from 12 to 4 p.m. Anybody that's ever lived in Macomb Gardens, we'd like for them to come back. We had a real nice crowd this past August, but I didn't change this. The one I used was August 20th, 2011, but we had one in 2013.
Is Macomb Gardens still predominantly a black?
No, no. It's been integrated, and I bet I don't know 5 people that live there. And I used to know everybody. I made it my business to know everybody, but it's no longer black.
Yeah, and that pastor moved the church back to Detroit. The members of the church also?
Some did, some didn't.
What was the reason you moved it back to Detroit?
First of all, they tried to get some land on Church and Little Mountain. And another church was moved. They moved out on 12 Mile. And, they couldn't get the financing to move it. And then we have the Romeo Village Hall. And that's right on 32 Mile of St. Clair. What I learned here was immense. The Underground Railroad went through here. And I had no idea that many people went through here. It was on the Underground Railroad. None. But the Second Baptist Church in Romeo says they're the oldest Black Baptist church in Macomb County. They're 2 years older than everybody else. They were formed in, they can't decide whether it's 1917 or 1918, but First Baptist would have been the next one in 1920. But they reached back on their 80th anniversary. The pastor that did their 80th anniversary was the pastor that took over after Aretha Franklin's father died. That was his pastor. He was the pastor of that church, New Bethel Baptist. The pastor at the time I took this was Reverend Terrence Golly. And their statement is, we are the oldest Black church in Macomb County. Some come close in age, but we are the oldest, said Sylvia Stewart, spokesman for the church. The festival included several speeches, an inspirational saxophone solo by Lydia Lewis, and the songs of the choir group, Ambassadors for Christ. More than 100 guests feasted on a banquet-style meal. The Reverend Robert Smith of the world-renowned New Bethel Baptist Church in Detroit was a featured speaker for the affair, and he preached inspirationally after the meal. And that's the pastor that took over when Aretha Franklin died. You know, they mugged him. He never recovered. He didn't believe in banks. And then they had the $40,000, they think, in his house. They come in and mugged him and took his money. And he never recovered. And that just about drove Aretha bankrupt, because he kept him in private nursing homes until he died. Now again, we're into New Haven, Romeo, and these are Washington. And that's 1880. And if there's no designation, that means they were white. If there was, it was either B for black or MU for here know what a mulatto is? Got one parent here and one parent there. Now, here's the Romeo Cemetery. Was established in 1861, and at one time, I knew that a kid I went to school with, his grandmother came from Romeo. I knew her name, and I went to the Romeo Cemetery, and they sure helped. I went to Romeo's Village Hall, and I've actually got a picture of his tombstone. That's the cemetery in Romeo, with the water tower in the background. And it's right next to Romeo High School on 32 Mile Road, or St. Clair. Some people refuse to say St. Clair, they say 32 Mile Road. Now that's the Romeo Library in downtown Romeo. There's two libraries in Romeo. One is in Washington Township, and it's on Van Dyke, let's say 3 miles south of this one. And I've been to both. And that's the one that's south of Romeo. It's a lot bigger than the one in downtown Romeo. But it's in Washington Township. What's really weird is this family is shown on some censuses in Bruce Township, Washington Township, or Romeo. They could have been in all three at the same time. So they changed boundaries. Now, there is the great-grandfather of the guy I went to school with. And I turned 74 in August, so he's been there late a long time. He was born in 1843 in Ontario. He died in 1943 in Romeo. His wife was born in 1855, and she died in 1939. And they're buried in the Romeo Cemetery. But during that time, the Romeo Cemetery was segregated. Our corner was back near the high school and the rear back part of it. And now it's integrated. Because before, wherever they buried us, we contaminated that ground. And it sounds weird now. Now, that's the old state police post on Van Dyke. And if you're looking for underground railroad pictures, equipment, where it could have been, and they won't tell you that was that Romeo was the headquarters. They won't tell you that. They'll show you all this information, and you have to guess. Was it in the Underground Railroad? But I've been there, and it's the old Michigan State Police post, and you can see where it says Michigan State Police. Anybody have any questions?
Is that sort of a historical building now, is that what you're saying?
Yes, it's got 3 floors in it. The bottom floor, I guess we could call it the ground floor, is strictly the Underground Railroad. The next floor up is Michigan history in Romeo. 3rd floor up is old-time Michigan history. But what details us as black, what we get, we were Africans, Negroes, colored, back to Negro, and then James Brown come out with We're Black and Proud, and we became black, but a lot of folks didn't like the black part, so we became African American. So I have no idea what the next change is going to be.
John, where's that exactly? It's a museum now, right?
Yeah, it's on Van Dyke, old Van Dyke.
It's on Old Van Dyke. So
Yes.
is it north of south of 32 Mile Road?
It's north 2 blocks.
Okay.
So on the right-hand side. Yes.
So what was the path that people took when going from where to where on the Underground Railroad?
they tell you some stuff, and it don't make any sense to me, for the simple reason, why would they go out through Flat Rock to Lansing, to come to Romeo, to cross the bridge in Fort Huron, and go down to Amherstburg? It just don't. And some of them didn't go straight across, they came to Detroit next. And they never left Second Baptist Church. And I've been there, and they've got their basement decorated. The thing that's weird is they got the little benches that are only about like 8, 9 inches wide. And they slept, they did everything. You know, nothing's out in the open. Yes?
Didn't the railroad tracks went to Romeo and
Yes. I don't think so. We wouldn't have been on that train. Yes.
I lived in Romeo for 13 years, and there's a whole section of flat. Did you go through that area?
Yes.
Okay, and
It's right there north of 32 Mile Road. That's one of the
north of
places we could live.
32, east of Bandit.
Yes.
And there's a church, there's a grocery store.
There's 3 churches.
Yeah. And they those two people stay in that area. You don't see them in town at all. I've never seen them, to tell you the truth.
Well, there's a hardware store there,
Mm-hmm.
a grocery store.
Yeah. So why did they settle there? Did you find that out?
No, but I could guess that it was a place we could be.
Yeah.
We
And then,
couldn't be anywhere.
and then did you go through the Octagon House? Because
Yes.
they had
Then,
Underground Railroad there too.
now, there's a funeral home just south of downtown Romeo on the right-hand side.
Yes.
There's a guy named Webb that works as the undertaker in that funeral home, and he showed me the basement, and they haven't changed where they kept us while we waiting for transport to the next station. They call these stations on the Underground Railroad, we were going from one station to the next. But again, I had a real problem with those narrow benches, and I could not walk through the door. I'm not that big, but I couldn't walk through the door. I had to stoop and twist. So they must have been small people. Yes.
Curious, John, why today wouldn't these places, these are historical sites, why wouldn't they want to make that public so that people who were interested would like to go visit where you were to see those sites of the Underground Railroad?
As far as I know, it is public.
So we can go.
Nobody publishes it.
That's what I mean, and if I'm telling you, but I've not seen it anywhere where in writing where that's available. So you said it's a funeral home there?
To the right, just south of downtown, before you get to the Washington Township Library, and then you heard the basement and then sub-basement. Well, the sub-basement, we were there, and that's where they kept us to go to the next underground station. Now, I started this presentation off showing you Hart Plaza as the place we left from going to Amherstburg, and the statue that they put there showing this slave family escaped, and they did escape. They never lost a prisoner from the Second Baptist Church.
I think this is just a museum. It doesn't seem to me that it was built before the Civil War.
No. This is that used to be the state police post.
Yeah, but it's not that old. It's not 1865.
Oh, no, nowhere near that. They weren't doing this in 1865.
That's why the war was over.
Yeah. Did any of you see Lincoln in the last couple of days? It's been on TV. His trouble with passing the 13th Amendment. And some of the problems the Lincoln group had because of us. We were going to want to vote. But they didn't know. They gave us the right to vote. We weren't going to vote anyway. Okay. I don't know how much. Anybody have any more questions? Yes.
You talked about the settlement of Macomb Gardens. In Clinton Township, the area east of Gratiot, south of 15 Mile Road, Quinn Road area, what were the circumstances under which that was settled by African Americans?
I'm thinking with this picture I got in there of Ann Lou Johnson was a historian. She took a lot of pictures in Macomb Quinn Road area. So you gotta remember now, these were gravel pits on both sides of Quinn Road. You know where, the park is on Quinn Road, Rocky Hall Park School?
Yeah.
Okay, that was a gravel pit. They dumped garbage there for years. And they finally filled it up. They made a park and a school there. Now, my thoughts are, sooner or later, that's gonna hurt somebody with all the garbage they put in there. But it was the 5 Point. Then they built the incinerator. And now that's closed.
Well, when was the Quinn Road area settled by law?
Okay, the only thing I can come up with is 1921. When Ann Lou Johnson's grandfather, and I got a picture in this presentation of her sitting on her grandfather's lap in 1921. They took a picture. He's one of the oldest residents. Yes.
You said that you're forced to live in areas with de facto segregation.
Yes.
It wasn't actually in the deeds that you couldn't, in other areas, you couldn't sell blacks or Jews or all kinds of stuff.
You have to be a Caucasian, period. And Mount Clemens had this. Sterling Heights, Clinton Township. It wasn't, they didn't want the Chinese, Japanese, any of that. You had to be a Caucasian. If you were, you're okay.
There were areas that didn't have those restrictions, or?
Yes. And one area is Kibbe Flats in Mount Clemens, Quinn Road area in Clinton Township, Home Garden area in Roseville. And then when we go to Romeo, it was north of 32 Mile Road or St. Clair, 1 block. It's 1 block wide, but it runs about 10 blocks, almost back to the expressway from Van Dyke. Now we got 3 churches in Romeo, but none of them are on the main street. Now in Mount Clemens, Calvary Baptist is now on southbound Gratiot, but it wasn't there when I was a kid, because evidently they couldn't get building permits or something, but there's no old black church on the main street anywhere in Macomb County. Yes.
I grew up in Centerline and was told as I was a child that there was a sundown line. You know, the sundown line.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, I just wondered, apparently in Centerline it was just a fiction. I wonder whether there were any communities that really had a sundown line.
They did in the South, Birmingham, Alabama for one. You better be out of town by sundown. It's pretty simple. It's a white town. If it gets dark and you're not there, you're still there, you got a problem. Yes?
Yeah, my sister, because I moved from Michigan, from Arkansas, and my sister, who was 10 years younger, lived in an area, and they lived in one town and they worked in another town. They worked there, and she said that when you went to work, you had a certain time that you needed to be out of that town, because that was in Arkansas. I haven't experienced it in Michigan, but I do know, like you said, that there were certain areas that you lived in, period. And if you were, and you weren't shown a house, and even during our time, when you wanted to see a house in a certain area, you just weren't shown it.
And if you insisted, the next call is going to be to the police department, and they're going to arrest you for disturbing the peace. Ask somebody. I didn't get arrested because I left. But when I moved to Mount Clemens and bought the house I'm in today in 1967, on the west side of Gratiot, there's a whole subdivision there all the way back to the General Hospital, but it's not General Hospital anymore. But we weren't even allowed to look at the house, let alone buy it. But Carlton McGraw built the house I'm living in right now. That was one of the models on Flint River Drive. So I go back a few years, but right now we can live basically anywhere we want to live. Yeah, and she said, if you can afford it. Well, it's always been that way. Nobody has any more questions? Yes.
I know this is not the area you're speaking about, but would you know if Dearborn had a son down below?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
But I know they didn't allow us to live there.
Yes, I do know that.
We could work there. Because a lot of, Henry Ford went south and brought some of us back to work at his foundry. And they created Inkster for us. That's how Inkster was started. All right. And Mount Clemens got the same start. Roseville, Al Mack needed laborers for his. He had a big horse farm. And after that, we went to different ways. My dad had a job at Hudson Motors. I mean, anybody here will have to remember when they had the Hudson cars? Okay, he went there in 1927. He was working there when he went south and got my mother, married her, and brought her back to Michigan, and she hated every day she lived in Michigan. And the day she died, she still didn't want to be in Michigan. Now, her story was she did rather be in Kentucky in jail than free in Michigan.
Where'd you bury her?
Michigan? Lincoln Memorial with the rest of my relatives. I was showing the guy back there in the checkered vest. I got so many relatives buried in that cemetery, I said people live. But we've been here a long time.
So John, you grew up in Roseville?
Yes.
Did you go to Roseville High School?
Graduated from there.
Then what did you do?
I went in the Air Force. Because that was the year they had the recession of 58. You know, they started the 58 cars in 57. Well, before that, you get a job, General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, Bud Wheel, but it was a downtime. This is not something new like we just went through. It's not new. So I went in the Air Force. Stayed 4 years, and I come back. And I got a job at Waypoint Electric because I wanted to be an electrician. But they wouldn't hire me at Ford or Chrysler. They said I had to get what I wanted to be an electrician. They told me that I had to be in the union to get the job. And the union told me I had to have the job before I get the union.
Not much has changed.
Well, yeah. Now, we got skilled trades. But that was just my case. Now, in 1961, we're talking a long time ago when I got out of the Air Force. And I brought that booklet. I was showing a lady that the NAACP put out before the primary elections to show some of the ones that were killed to get the right to vote the South. Medgar Evers, four little girls that killed in Birmingham. This one was shot. That one was shot. And still we don't vote. But 2008, we had Barack Obama, and we did the most voting we've ever done. And same thing, and when he was reelected. Now there's a problem with the Tea Party because they don't like him at all. But you know, after this term, he's gone. But yesterday morning they had a program on about the Tea Party, and they said they forced this shutdown of the government, and they solved absolutely nothing. Now all they did was push it in January, and they got the same problem. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, and the presentation I'm working on now for 2014 is African Americans that in the 1950s and below in my lifetime made a difference in Macomb County. And just to name a couple, the only black county commissioner I've ever known in Macomb County was Bobby Hill. The first city council person in Mount Clemens, he's dead. The first one that started a funeral home, Harold Henry's still alive. The other two that started Woodman's dead. And United Memorial Funeral Home is the name of the funeral home. It's on Market Street in Mount Clemens. So that's my presentation coming for next year. And I'm working on that now. This is the one I did earlier in the year for Chesterfield Township. And right now, they're telling me now, they want to see this one I did in Chesterfield Township, the one you just seen. They want to see it again in Chesterfield. And then they want to see the one I'm doing for 2014 in Chesterfield. Now, the reason I got into this was I ran into too many black kids that tell them about the slavery in this country, and they tell you, you're out of your mind.
Well, they grew up not knowing it was slavery.
Yes. If nobody tells them, they're not going to get into school. They don't teach you about that. If it's not European history, it ain't in the book. So that was one of my reasons. I had more than one reason, but that's one of them. The other joke I had was I looked for my wife's mother's family when she passed. Because the teacher in Mount Clemens High School wanted each kid in her class to know who their grandparents were, and pictures if they could get them, and great-grandparents. Well, guess who didn't know? Had no idea where her parents came from. None. But the only reason I didn't know is I didn't care. I'm just like those kids now that says, there wasn't no slavery. Yes.
Did you say you had information on Quinn Road doing this program, or?
Yes. I just didn't present much of it. In fact, I got a whole folder here on Quinn Road.
Oh, okay, but there's nothing in this presentation.
I had to figure out something that I could do in like 30, 35 minutes to cover all 5 communities. Like, I got a picture of Prince Drury. He's the first one elected to a post in Macomb County, school board, Clinton Township. I got a picture of him. First lady that got to be a principal of a school, Robbie Hall Parker. They've got a school in Clinton Township named Robbie Hall Parker School. Yes?
Question, I read, and I can't remember where, that the term African American in a strict sense refers to descendants of slaves, but not somebody of, who's not a descendant of a slave. And that would include Barack Obama, that he's always referred to as an African American. Can you clarify that? Is that the strict sense of the word African American or not?
No. What you're missing is, there's I'm trying to think of his name. He's a star on TV. His great-grandmother, great-great-great-great-grandmother was white, and she was impregnated by an African. And they had to change things. Before, you always went with who your mother was. So if the white slave owner impregnated a black woman, you were black. So the way they got around that is they called the one-drop rule. Anybody here ever heard of the one-drop rule? You got 1 drop of black blood, you're black. Well, see, they never had a problem with me. I can't blend in anywhere. But I know people that can. Some did, some didn't. A good example is Thomas Jefferson and Sally Heming. Sally Heming had 5 kids, supposedly from our history books, but Sally Heming, they could only trace 1. Where'd the other 4 go? I assume they went to Washington and blended in. They've been running a program last year and this year. Who do you think you are?
The DNA.
Yeah. And they've been running that, this professor, Gates. He's been running this. They run into some real interesting stories. Who their people thought they were versus who they are, or where this one's parents came from. You know, they got North African and Sub-Saharan African. Hey, big difference. That's the Arab and black. Same time.
Are you writing a book, or putting things together for a book, or?
I'm putting stuff together, but I haven't decided to write a book for the simple reason that's tough. You know, this is my 3rd program. I'm working on my 4th one. First, I churches in Macomb County. And at the time I originally did it, it was 33. Now it's 44 and growing.
John, do you know where your parents came from, or your grandparents?
Yes. I go back to 1785 on my mother's side and 1820 on my father's side. And I got the census with their names on it.
Where did they go?
Cadwell County, Kentucky. Now, the story in my family is they were sold. They were in Alabama, and they were sold to Kentucky during the Civil War. But what happened, they sold my grandmother's oldest brother, because he went into the slave owner's church on his horse. You know, they weren't going to have that. They gave him a good whip and they sold him. Well, they sold him to Calvert City, Kentucky. My mother's family kept the name Calvert. I have no idea where the Emerson name came from. None. But I know we didn't come from Africa with the name Emerson. Anybody else have anything? Now, the one thing I can show you is I brought those two booklets I had of, it lists some of the ones that died in 1963, 1964, for us standing up and wanting to vote. Medgar Evers was field secretary for the NAACP, was killed in his driveway. And he's on the front of this magazine. And then I got a lady that, by these 4 little girls who were killed in Birmingham, in the church bombing, and she's standing over them, tears running down her face. Anybody interested in seeing that? It's on the table back here. I bought 2 copies.
When you said they were killed, was that by local police, or was that just like mom?
That's no. The one they convicted was the Ku Klux Klansman.
Okay.
See, the Ku Klux Klan did not exist before the Civil War. It was some way to control us. Because there was a real fear that we'd marry white women. That's still a problem. Today, in 2013, you know, with that Lincoln movie, it shows that was the reason for some of them not voting for the 13th Amendment, because they call it a slippery slope. Next thing you're going to want is women to vote. And that's on TV. Today's Macomb Daily, they got an editorial from a guy that says the reason that the committee that fought this Obamacare so hard is because Obama was black, and they shouldn't have anybody black in the White House. And they listed a list of things. It's today's Macomb Daily, in fact. On the editorial page. Pardon?
I can't believe it got away with printing that.
Why? Editorial page, you can put anything you want. But it's in today's Macomb Daily. It lists his name. Now the guy that actually did this is not the one that wrote the article in the Macomb Daily. Another guy played games with it. Well, the big thing is the one drop rule. Anybody have anything else? Otherwise, that's what I've got.
I gotta make a comment on it, one drop rule.
Okay?
It's just gotta be a saying. I mean, how will anybody know if it's 1 drop or 50 drop? You know what I'm saying? I mean, common sense I'm talking here.
Okay, common sense. There's a gentleman next to you. There's 3 in front of you. How do you know they're not have the one drop rule?
I know, but this is the thing, who was making the determination and at what point in time?
At the end of slavery.
like anything else I'm saying, it was just somebody said this, and then everybody else took it up or agreed with it. And they were just saying, because there's no way to prove, except by the obvious reason of color, or
Yes.
suspicion of color.
See, all Europeans don't look the same, no matter what you believe.
I know.
Some are lighter, some are darker. Now, if the dark one they accuse of being mixed, they might drop the one drop of on him or her.
Yeah, but it's just a statement, is what I'm saying. It is no way that it could be proven. This is long before DNA, is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
I think Jefferson proposed back before, I'm not sure what it was, I think it was when he was governor of Virginia, that anyone who was 1/8 black or less would be legally white. And a lot of the southern states didn't want that, so but Jefferson's children, by the way, were only 1/8 black.
Yeah.
The children he had with Callahan. So, they started this idea of one drop of blood.
That's as good as anything else.
But that would have to be in the case when you knew what the parent was doing, and that didn't apply to the majority of people. In some instances like that, and in some other instances like that.
Okay. I'm trying to think of that abolitionist that went around the country that was fathered by a white guy, a slave master. I'm trying to think of his name. No, he talked with John Brown, but he wouldn't join John Brown. John Brown wanted him to join the insurrection. And John Brown and his sons were killed. This guy lived to 1895. I got the information in my packet back there, but I didn't think I'd need it. But I'm glad somebody showed up to hear the presentation. I really am. Thank you.
Thanks, Johnny.
And anybody wants to see that article, stop by the table back here and you can see it.
Yeah, okay, that's good. I can remember that.
Current time.
I know there are people that